All right. Fight Club is a novel written by Chuck Palahniuk. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And a movie directed by David Fincher, who has never made a bad movie. So, this may be one of the only pieces of fiction where the movie is actually better than the book, mainly because the movie doesn't have as much filler. I mean, the book, there's a lot of scenes that seem to either drag on for way too long or just don't seem to be necessary. But the movie feels a lot more compact, a lot less wasted space. So I know I prefer that version. I mean, most people don't even know that Fight Club was a book originally, so the movie definitely kicked out the book spot in most people's hearts. There's a lot of things that make Fight Club great, but I think mainly it's just because there's so much stuff that the author and no, I guess director, like just so many themes and issues in modern day America, and I mean, I guess modern society as a whole, that just people need to deal with, from masculinity to uh, occupation choice, mental illness. There's just so much stuff that I cannot believe is fit into one work, and it's all done really well, which is amazing. And I mean, not only has he constructed all these great, deconstructions of tropes that are common in, modern society, but he's also found a really, really great way to just tear down the whole mental illness side of the character and, create a plot twist that was really, really well done and creative at the time, so much so that there have been people that have copied it, and I mean, entire movies and other pieces of media, when people see a certain plot twist, which I don't want to spoil, even though that might seem silly because everyone knows it at this point. When everyone sees that, they think back to, oh hey, just like so and so from Fight Club, which is, that's an achievement in and of itself. Now I want to get into the presentation for both the novel and the movie. I'm going to start with the novel first because I actually read the book first. Well, it's very weird because it's written like a actual schizophrenic man would write. It, Chuck Palahniuk has this weird writing style, which he calls writing in choruses, where he will set up these random little like jokes, but then he'll make them come back, choruses, and he'll just keep making it, so much so that like if you were to flip to probably three-fourths of the way through the book, you would probably not be able to understand what the hell's going on, simply because there's so many of these running gags that are going on that you just think the author is batshit crazy, because there's, I want to say, like a maximum of 8 or so just things that are set up early on that come back at least 10 times. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But these jokes are just so well timed, and at first they're really humorous, but you start to form a bond with these little choruses that you just thought were dumb throwaway jokes at first. And it's very strange because I almost feel like these gags that he keeps using, these little choruses, it almost makes me feel like I can connect to the main character more, like it was an inside joke between me and my friends to describe a situation, instead of just saying, oh, the main character was depressed. Instead, he uses these running gags, so we already know like the feeling or the emotion that that running gag first was trying to provoke, and then it comes back and you really start to feel for the main character. It's great. Now, the movie kind of drops the chorus aspect of it. I mean, they're still there and they're still kind of prevalent, but they're not as important as they were in the book. I mean, they're referenced a few times as tiny running gags, but they're not important, or they don't come back as nearly as much as in the book. But that said, this movie's presentation is amazing. The lighting is fantastic for what they did within like the Fight Club itself, the home. I mean, just the city lights during the nighttime scenes. It's pretty fantastic with what they did with that. The fights themselves are fast, quick, gory. The blood and gore in this is really great, actually. They're not afraid to show how dark and violent and gritty Project Mayhem and Fight Club can get in this, which is pretty brutal. I mean, it's not as gory as in the book, but in all honesty, I wouldn't want it to be. I mean, I don't want to see people walking around with holes in their face and whatnot. The acting is fantastic. I mean, everyone who played a part as a main character in this movie is just great. They nailed it. there's not a single bad performance in this, I'd say. Just everyone's acting and line delivery is just so spot on that it's just so amazing to watch. Every scene is fantastic. The only real issue I have is that the endings of both versions of this story seem almost polar opposite of one another. I mean, on one hand, we have the book, which is kind of anti everything that happened up to that point, and it's just the rejection of all the ideas that had been shown in the book. And it makes sense, and it's kind of like what a sane person would feel about this situation, just coming to terms with everything that Tyler did was wrong. But in the movie, we have this weird thing where they're like, yeah, Tyler was kind of a prick, and then just they kind of reinforce at the final scene, oh, well, some of the stuff he did was cool. And it just feels really out of place, or like almost like a compromise between the two ideas that a little bit of rebellion is okay, but not too much. And I don't know, I think the book's ending was a little more suitable because the movie's ending is just too polarizing. I mean, they literally say, oh, well, everything Tyler did was pretty awful, and he was pretty much crazy. And then they seem to just kind of accept it at the end, and I'm like, well, what the hell, guys? You're kind of being hypocritical here, but maybe I'm just not getting it. Who knows? But what really, at the end of the day, is my favorite part about Fight Club is that it's anti-conformist, but within reason. Um, and mainly because most other works that are anti-conformist, they're not actually anti-conformist. They say, don't conform to the mainstream or what people expect of you, but conform to our rebellious message instead. And that's not being truly anti-conformist, because you're still conforming. What this movie says is rely on yourself as an individual, because any type of conformism is bad. If you're conforming to the mainstream, you're doing it wrong. If you're conforming to an anti-mainstream type of deal, you're also doing it wrong, just in a different light. I mean, this is something that other works tend to ignore. They just say, be rebellious and conform to our message of not conforming, which is completely ridiculous and misses the point. I mean, this just does it so well, and it truly wants you to think of yourself as an individual and not as something that can just be thrown around or hypnotized by any type of message, which I think is really great. At the end of the day, Fight Club is definitely a 10 out of 10 work, both versions of it. If you can only, for some reason, obtain one version, I'd say go with the film, just because it's like the book, but better and without all the leftovers. I mean, definitely give both a chance, though. I mean, I think both are fairly cheap. I checked Amazon recently, and you can obtain both copies of, or both versions of this work for fairly cheap. This is definite 10 out of 10 material, both versions.